Hello, everyone. My name is Arriale Starbird. This is the Spirit Warrior Wisdom Podcast. Today, I have with me Stefan Verstappen. He's a Kung Fu master and author of several books. So, Stefan, feel free to introduce yourself a little more for people who don't know anything about you.
Yeah, that's a big problem, Ariel, because I hate to talk about myself, and I talk about myself too much already. And personally, I find it kind of cringe. I'm a Canadian. Yeah, I'm a martial artist, but I describe myself as a Renaissance man. Martial arts is just one facet of what I do. Now, I've been an instructor for 40 years. I've lived in China, traveled all over the world studying martial arts, and but it's just one facet of being a Renaissance man, and we can talk about that later. I've written 8 books, um, and hundreds of podcasts, and I created a lot of YouTube videos. Several that I'm very proud of is Defense Against a Psychopath and Paradise Stolen, which is a 7-part series about, it's very, it's not very hardcore, and I did that on purpose. I wanted to kind of explain to people what's going on without scaring them. People seem to be very easily spooked these days, especially by truth. And I hate that word truth too, because it assumes that I know the truth and you don't know the truth. But today's Thursday, that's the truth. I had to think there for a minute. And yeah, I've traveled the world. I'm an outdoorsman. I used to teach wilderness survival skills for the Toronto Boys Home, which was a halfway house for teenagers that were just coming out of prison. And my job was to take them into the woods and teach them how to camp and how to paddle a canoe and how to hike, and which was an amazing program. That's what young men need. They need. I was a graduate of the Outward Bound program. I went there for 3 years, and that gave me all the qualifications to teach it later. Um, so, I mentor people, I talk to people, I try. More recently, well, starting about 10 years ago, I promoted survivalism, preppers, how to be a prepper, because I could see where society was going. And I think most people see now that things aren't going back to the glorious 1960s, which was a great time. I lived in. I was just a kid, but still was a great time. And so, well, you got to get ready because things might get ugly, probably will get ugly. And, I was a Boy Scout. You know what the motto of the Boy Scouts are: be prepared. And so I started teaching and promoting preparedness, and also, based on my wilderness survival skills and things like that. But now for the last 3 years, I've been promoting forming communities. I have a book coming out soon called The Complete Guide to Forming Communities for Mutual Aid, Support, and Charity. I belong to a mutual aid prepper community here where I live now. Wonderful people, wonderful community. We do everything for each other. We've got medical teams, and we've got communications, and we got gardens and food co-ops and homeschooling, Meals on Wheels. We do a lot to support our communities. We just had a great Christmas dinner last week. 80 people at the local church, and all free. Everything we do is free for the members. Members aren't charged a monthly fee or anything. Nothing. We volunteer our time. Because why? Because I was a prepper. I'm promoting people to be prepared for when things aren't as good as they are now. Believe it or not, things still aren't that terrible yet. We can still walk down the street without being worried about being, well, depends on where you live.
Right.
But things are probably going to get worse than this. So, community is a really important part of surviving, but it's a strategy to combat whatever you want to call it, the deep state, the new world order, this overwhelming force of manipulation and tyranny that they're inflicting on us. How are we going to fight these people? What are we going to do when they bring in the 15-minute cities and the digital debit cards and the digital media and uh, uh, digital tracking? What are we going to do to fight these people? How can we escape our own governments? Because government really is your number one enemy, always has been throughout history. It's always been the government. Who's doing this to us? No, it's your own government, and you're paying for it. And by the way, in one of the videos in my series, Paradise Stolen, people don't realize this, but the government takes 80% of all your earnings, all your wealth through taxes. 80%. I mean, this is insanity that we pay these people 80% of our livelihoods so that they can, inflict their tyranny on us.
Right,
So how do we fight
fund
them?
human trafficking, because that's where it's going. Black
Yeah,
markets and human trafficking. It's
yeah.
fantastic, right? Well, I wanted to ask you, there's actually so many questions I want to ask you, but since
Shoot.
you brought up the communities, I think that is, there's probably the most important thing right now, because we kind of do have this societal collapse and people are very dissociated, disconnected, depressed. And there's actually, my friend, I know a lot of warriors, a lot of martial artists, and probably, I don't know if other people are paying as much attention to all this, but warriors, I feel like, are probably the most observant to everything that's going on.
Yes.
And my friend is a strong Christian, and he was, he was saying that he was pointing out something in the Bible, and I found the quote, and it's from Matthew 24:12, and says the love of most people will grow cold due to the spread of wickedness and sin everywhere. False prophets will arise and mislead many people. True Christians, even those whose faith is weak, will persevere to the end, and their love towards God and the church will grow cold. However, those without the Spirit will have a colder love for self and money, which will become colder and colder in the last days. The overwhelming spread of evil will do many people in, leaving nothing left of their love but a mound of ashes. Holding out to the end is what God requires. I'm like, wow, that's actually really first of all, it's very accurate. Yes, people have
Sure.
gotten very cold. All they care about is money and themselves. Maybe not even that. Maybe they're just going through the motions and they don't really care about anything. And that's part of the reason why this lovelessness and carelessness is why there's so much dissociation and alienation. And it only kind of underlines the necessity for hard-based communities and hard-based relationships. And
Yes.
since you were talking about that and you're really working hard on that, I wanted to ask you, so for people who live in big cities, for people who live in smaller areas, village-like areas, it's actually easier, but in big cities, it's very hard. It's very tough to survive here. There's now, because of the inflation, all that, there's a lot of theft and crime. What do you do when you live in a big city like New York City, Chicago, LA? How do you build communities like this?
You can't. I'm sorry. I want to be positive. I don't want to scare people with black pilling them or red pilling them. Um, I have tried for 10 years to form a community in Toronto, which is a big city, and failed utterly. Couldn't get anywhere. I've been everywhere. I went to all the prepper communities and the survivalist communities, and I did meetup groups, and I taught Tai Chi in the park for free, hoping that people that would come to the Tai Chi class would then be suitable to kind of recruit into a community, support mutual aid. It's not like I'm trying to take advantage of. I'm trying to save them. I couldn't get anywhere, Ariel. Um,
Why do you feel that is?
there's something about people in the big city. They're just, it's the big city itself, okay? It's being around too many strangers all the time. It affects, I think, the human psychology. You start to become more selfish, more afraid, more paranoid, more standoffish, more isolated. Something about living in the big city. Now, listen, I'm a big city boy. I like the big city. I grew up in Toronto. I loved Hong Kong. Hong Kong is really a wonderful city. It's huge. I like going down the back alleys. And so I'm a, my theme song was You Belong to the City when I was in China. So I like the big cities, but big cities don't have humanity.
Exactly.
They don't have humanity. Now, all the problems you mentioned earlier, about the disassociation and the negativity and the selfishness, that all stems from not being part of a community. What I found in researching my book on communities is that, yes, we need to form communities to learn how to support each other so that we can survive the collapse of our society or the collapse of the currency or World War III. Who knows what they're planning for us next, right? The evil forces that be. Yeah, community is the only way to survive that. But even if we weren't threatened with the end of civilization, which we are, but even if we weren't, even if the future looked rosy, you still need to be part of a community. The studies that I've read about what a community does to people um, cures depression, cures the isolation, cures rheumatoid arthritis, cures heart disease, cures suicide. We are social animals. We are in our element when we belong to a group of people that we love and that love us back. Really important. Like the community that I belong to now. I mean, I really feel the love from them. And you got to understand, I'm pretty much a cynic when it comes to, I'm not a kumbaya kind of guy. Oh, everybody love each other. That's not me. I'm more of a warrior. But my God, the love I get from the community, and I love them all back. And we all love each other, and we do things to help each other. The studies that I'd read about the incidence of drug addiction and depression and suicide, and many diseases, like I said, rheumatoid arthritis, diabetes, heart disease, Alzheimer's, dementia. All those things are drastically reduced when people belong to a community. All of us, struggling, fighting by ourselves, trying to, earn a living. And of course, now they've, listen, there's a whole program to turn us all into narcissists and psychopaths. So, the common theme now in media and movies, and that is that, oh, you got to be a psychopath, get yours, screw the other guy.
Yeah. You know what's really interesting? I was looking at some studies, and people were talking about it online too, that sometimes people aren't a narcissist, but as soon as they get into a relationship, they become narcissistic because it just seems to be the way of the world. Everyone just wants something for themselves. I just think it's so toxic and horrible.
It is.
Interestingly, regarding the end times, I've read the Bible. I'm not necessarily, I've read lots of other sacred texts. I kind of contrast and compare them. I don't necessarily just follow just one, but I find that there's a lot of interesting quotes in the Bible that seem to be coming true. And another one, we're talking about heart, right? And how important it is to be heart-centered. So I have a client whose husband died during the whole COVID thing. And she says when she was in the hospital, she noticed that the entire ward, everybody there, pretty much 99% of the people there, they were all men in the 50s. And she's like, I see a pattern. What is going on? Why is it all the men? And when I'm kind of intuitive, so I tuned in intuitively because she asked the nurses, what's the pattern? And the nurse said, well, they're all, what did she say? I can't remember the exact word, but it was like they're resistant to our system. And I'm like, oh, that's a red flag. Are you saying that
Mhm.
these men, because they don't want to take the shot, you got it, off them? But what I thought when I tuned in intuitively is that, well, men in the 50s, they start to have weaker hearts. A lot of men have heart issues at that point from years of abuse or overwork, et cetera, alcohol, you name it.
Yeah.
And so they may not have a diagnosis, especially if they don't go to the doctor, they're not going to get a diagnosis, but the heart may
Mm.
be at 20% function. They don't have pain,
Yeah.
they don't, and so they don't know, but that's
Yeah.
what's going on. So then they're hit with something and it affects their heart. And I thought it was significant that a lot of people during that time were dying of myocarditis. And
Mhm.
then I again found this quote from the Bible, Luke 21:26, men's hearts will fail them for fear and anxiety over what is coming on the earth. And me and my client were just talking about how there's all these men in their 50s who died off during that time. So maybe they were worried and anxious about what was coming, and that would affect their heart.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, men won't talk about their feelings, but a lot of those men are suffering from loneliness. Their wives are gone, their kids don't talk to them. That will kill a guy. That'll kill most people. When you become ostracized and isolated from friends and family, your chances of dying from a rare disease or any kind of disease
Fire.
skyrockets.
Absolutely right.
So if you want to stay healthy, so listen, forming communities is important to survive the collapse that is probably coming. But even before that, it's important just to live. You will die from some horrible disease if you are isolated and alone and depressed and miserable and anxious and worried, and that will kill you. Good friend of mine, Dr. Ron Kapp, wrote a book called The Blue Zones. And these are areas all over the world where they're clusters, right? And clusters of people that tended to live into their hundreds. Like everybody in the village lives to be 110. Well, what's the secret to long life? And so they went there and they researched the water and the food they ate, and was it the wine? Was it the soil that they grew their crops? And what was it? They couldn't find any one sort of factor that would say why they would live to be 110. Only one factor. They all belonged to a community. They all had
Extended family.
friends
Yeah,
that
very,
were
yeah,
80 years. They've been friends for 80 years.
yep.
And they go to the little cafe down on the corner and they break bread and they have their cappuccino and they have their, you know, dinners together and they talk. And the one common factor for a long, happy, healthy life, and I'm saying they live to be 110 and they walk 10 miles a day and they work in the garden. I mean, it's not like they're in a deathbed or something, like they're all crippled and used up. I mean, they're still healthy till the day they die. The one common factor is they were part of a community.
Absolutely. I was doing that research too, and it is very interesting how our brain actually adapts to the number and the quality of relationships that we have.
Yeah.
And it's like not having these relationships, being on our devices all the time, actually damages our brain. Our society has brain damage from not having the right type of relationships. And I think people don't know how to repair that brain damage. It's literally traumatic brain damage,
Yeah.
TBI.
Yeah.
And so these people in the blue zones, they had very extensive extended networks of extended family and a variety of other networks of overlapping extended families. Yes, I think it's amazing. It's like a chainmail of overlapping networks. We lost it, and
Yes.
I was trying to look back in time to see where exactly did we lose that. And I don't know for sure, Stefan. This is just my theory right now. Sometimes I just dig and dig and dig, and I look through rabbit holes, and I have little insights. So I learned about Tartaria. There's very little like actually information that helps us to tie that stuff together, but it appears there was a very advanced civilization all over the world with all kinds of very interesting technology and relationships that were intact. And all of that, it seems to be erased almost overnight. You know about that, right?
Yes.
And
I think
yeah,
I
go ahead.
think that was done on purpose.
Absolutely on purpose.
It's done on purpose to alienate us and isolate us and ensure our early death. We know they want to kill us, right? And so one of the best ways to kill us is to separate us from our fellow human beings and separate us from our culture and traditions, which is another thing that I try to promote. Is like, we don't have any traditions anymore. Can you sing a song that your grandparents from their home country would have sung?
So I was born in the Soviet Union. So my grandparents, very unfortunately, were part of the Communist Party. I think not willingly. So they probably sang communist songs. So I wouldn't want to do that.
Yeah,
But they
yeah,
lost it. They had other traditions prior to that, their ethnic traditions that they lost, because I have ancestors in Middle East and Central Asia and Siberia and so I know I have some shamanism that comes to me, and all of that was lost. I don't.
yes.
I just feel it, but I don't know exactly what happened there. Communism just wiped everything out.
Oh, communism is evil.
Hmm.
It's the most evil system on the planet. It's so hateful. I despise communism. I can't believe there's still people that are thinking that this is some sort of answer. I mean,
It's just brainwash. It's absolute.
it's brainwashing,
And when you have
absolutely.
traumatic brain injury, you think that's a great idea.
Yeah, and the brain injury is true. But I think my hunch is, and I don't have any proof for this, but becoming a part of a community again will heal the brain damage. It really will.
I think you're right about that. Something miraculous can happen there. I do agree with that. Real love can heal. Absolutely.
Yeah, there's a book called, oh, I read this back in the 70s called Mega Brain. And it showed how plastic the brain really is. How, it's a myth that you start losing brain cells and get dumber as you get older. That's not true. You can regrow
Oh,
those
that's true. Yeah,
dendritic connections, right?
you can. Yes.
You can grow more brain cells. It's not, you were born with so many, and then you die. Uh, they just die off one by one. So that book shows that, made clear to me that the brain is very plastic and it can rejuvenate. The same with the human body. Um, you can get over cartilage damage if you believe it. I don't know if you've ever heard of the documentary called The Placebo Effect. And they did a study on men that had degenerative cartilage disease in their knees, right? They could hardly walk. And they divided them up. 6 of them, they gave cartilage surgery where they go in and they use a little laser just to blow away all the cartilage. Doesn't really help because now you're bone on bone in the joint. So they weren't really helped by it. But with the control group, or the experimental group, I should say, what they did is they simulated the surgery. They simulated it to such a degree that even though the person was under anesthesia and unconscious, they would play a videotape of a previous surgery showing the endoscope going into the knee and blasting away the fragments of cartilage. And they played that on the screen as though it was like a real surgery. And well, they tested them a year later. The ones that had the real surgery were back in a wheelchair. They can't walk. The ones that had the fake surgery, so nothing really happened to them, were running marathons.
That's incredible. But Stefan, I think that probably only works if people believe in doctors. If someone is skeptical of doctors, it might not work on them.
Well, it wouldn't work on me because I don't believe in doctors. But
Yeah, it wouldn't work on me either. Holistic doctors are different. Functional medicine, totally different field, but
yes,
conventional doctors from I have a long story of my, dealing with the medical system and
no, that
just never trusted them. This reminded me of an experiment. I only heard a little bit about it. I don't remember the details. I heard about it on George Norrie show, where I think it was the government or the military who did this experiment. So it was very well put together. I think they did it in the 60s, where they took an entire city and they isolated those people and told them that they're in the 40s. And all these people aged backwards and they started to look like they did in 20 years before.
yeah.
And it was like unbelievable. Old people lost their wrinkles. It's the mind did that. They believed what they were told. And it's like, when you think like, but who knows about that? But if you think like anyone can do that, these were not psychics, they were not
Right.
special in that sense in any way. They were just regular people who changed their belief, and then
Yes.
that happened. Pretty amazing, right?
Well, the take-home point from that experiment and the one with the gentleman with the knee problems is that your mind can heal all of that. It can heal it. Now, what mechanism you need to employ to get your mind to focus on healing that. Um, Sometimes it's, just belief in God. If that works for you, then it works. It really
Absolutely.
does.
Well, and speaking of that, Stefan, this is why I started this podcast to begin with, because when I found martial arts, it was love at first sight. I'm like, I cannot believe I didn't study this before. It just like when I read the martial arts philosophy, I'm like, I'm like that. I already think like that. Why didn't I know? Well, the reason I didn't know is because my parents would never pay for it. It's like as boys and girls were treated differently in society. So I just didn't get that part of it. But so what I found is that a lot of times the things we struggle with in relationships or business or daily life or health, using the martial arts philosophy can be an antidote to the sickness. It can be medicine for the ailment if you use that philosophy correctly. And so this is why I wanted to ask you, because you're a kung fu master, how do you use the martial arts philosophy to focus your mind to heal the sickness of the world?
Well, I would recommend my book, The Master's Guide to the Way of the Warrior, which is, I spent like 25 years writing that book. I mean, I started taking notes when I first began martial arts 40 years ago. Yeah, 40 years ago. So I've been taking notes because I've always been a writer. So I would take notes, my thoughts about the way of the warrior. And I've read everything about, the martial philosophy, everything from Miyamoto Musashi to Clausewitz to The Art of War. I've read it all. And I started taking notes. Now, for me, I never take somebody's word for something. I mean, okay, if you say this is that, okay, I'll believe you, but I got to see for myself whether it's true. And so the same thing with the martial arts, with the qigong and the different meditation practices and the sparring styles. And I had to test all of that for myself. And I did. I tested it all. And what I found worked and what I found didn't work, I put that in the book. So it's such a broad subject, right? What facet of martial arts do we want to talk about? Visualization. When we talk about visualization, we're again getting into the mind controlling the body. So if you're sick, I was teaching at a club here in Toronto, and we had uh, an oncologist, Dr. Goldstein, this old Jewish oncologist, and I asked him, I said, he was one of my students. I said, Dr. Goldstein, listen, I got to ask you. I said, you treat a lot of cancer patients, right? He says, yes. I said, have you ever seen cases where cancer spontaneously um, healed itself, disappeared? He says, yeah. He says, it's rare. But we have seen cases of cancer disappearing. Stage 4 cancer, gone in 3 days. You use visualization. One of the techniques is that, let's say you have a tumor. Let's say it's in your liver. So you visualize your liver, you visualize the tumor on your liver, right? So this is like a meditation. I get a little bit upset with people when they say, oh, I meditate. What kind of meditation? I mean, there's like a dozen different types of ways to meditate. And what is the purpose of your meditation? One of the purposes of meditation is to use visualization. So they did these experiments where they would get the patient to visualize the tumor, and then you're going to use qigong. Qigong is like internal energy. It's a universal energy. It's intimately connected with breath, which the Hindus would call prana, and what the Greeks used to call pneuma, air, and so qigong and plasma. The electric universe theory. We are all connected with each other through frequency, electrical frequencies. That's why it's possible to communicate with distant galaxies instantaneously because we're connected already. Right? So they would visualize this tumor shrinking. So what you would do is you would breathe in through the nose, into your belly, and out through your mouth, which is a standard Qigong yoga breathing technique, right? As you breathe in, you imagine a blue light coming in, and it comes into your belly. And the belly is the center of your body, the Tantian, they call it in Japanese. No, Tantian is Chinese. Hara, they call it the Hara in Japanese. And then as you breathe out, you imagine this energy dispersing through your body. So this is what we call small circle Qigong. Breathe in, absorb the energy, breathe out, disperse that energy throughout your body. But when you're working with a tumor, you now disperse that energy into the tumor and you imagine it shrinking. And there's been cases recorded where that tumor would shrink. So, again, we talked about it just a minute ago, mind over body, and we can use, and again, this is part of the martial arts tradition, the Qigong, the breathing techniques, energizing your body. Now you can take that energy and direct it to different parts of your body, and you can make yourself younger. You can make yourself younger. You want to reverse aging. Now do the same thing, the Qigong, the breathing. And as you energize, you imagine it's like one of those movies where the calendar flipping through the months, but backwards. 2010, 1999, 1980, and you imagine the calendar flipping backwards and that you're retro aging. And you imagine your body becoming leaner, more muscular. You imagine your wrinkles disappearing. You do that long enough, you will
Eventually you
reverse
get it. You know,
aging.
Stefan, it may you so the insight I just had is I have a lot of clients and they have a lot of success with the protocols, but here's one thing I noticed. A lot of times, if they're the only person in their family who's doing all this work, they're improving their lives, they're getting so much better, and no one else is.
Hmm.
Eventually, one of the three things happen. One, they start to teach their family. That's the best case scenario. They teach, they guide, they lead, and the family catches on. In some cases, the family is stubborn or they're lazy, they don't feel like doing anything, and the person feels alienated. And if the person is very strong, they continue on their own and they find a new community, new people. Alternatively, they turn back because it's so lonely to be healthy by yourself. They go back to their unhealthy family and do what they do. And that's the worst case scenario. So yeah, it's all possible. But again, doing it by yourself ultimately doesn't serve. You have to bring your people with you. You have to be part of a community doing all this together.
I
Right?
know. There we get. We circle back around to the community again. So, with my community, um, we do a lot of things. Mostly I teach them first aid skills. And I also do a talk. I tell stories on how to be ruthless and cunning, guerrilla warfare tactics. Get people's,
To ask you about that.
I
Can I?
know you do.
So yeah, when go ahead and finish your idea, and then I'll ask you about that.
But I also teach them cane fighting, so I bring the community with me. So it's really quite remarkable. Last Thursday was our meeting. We meet every Thursday. I come to the meeting. Everybody's got a new cane. A couple of weeks earlier, somebody said, "Oh, I know somebody that produces canes," and they showed me an example of the cane. I said, "This is a good cane. Yeah, get these." So everybody bought a cane, right? And they brought it to the meeting, and I taught them how to customize the cane a little bit to make it more effective for combat. And I do workshops on cane fighting. So I try to bring the community with me. Um,
Now
It
I do
takes,
as well. I
huh?
learned my lesson for a long time, especially in my 20s and even in my 30s. I really thought I could just be independent. I was always very, very independent, and I thought I can just do whatever I need on my own. I'm just here to serve. I don't really need anything for me. I just always had that attitude, and I realized I was wrong because there are so many people who are failing, utterly failing, and I see how they just don't know what they don't know. And if they knew even the basics, and what is it going to take for me to teach them? I all I got to do is just share a little bit, like what we're doing now, and
Yeah,
somebody's going to listen to this. Somebody's going to say, well, I didn't know any of this. Why didn't anyone tell me? Like
yeah.
especially young people who are like watching absolutely horrible content online. My son is
Oh,
13. I can see what they're watching. It's absolute retardation. It's just horrible. And it's like I tell them stuff like that. We have these kinds of conversations, and so just kind of as a little example of what's the result, when you lead and teach and do these kinds and have these kinds of conversations with your family, the outcome. I'll just share this little story that happened recently. He was telling me how in his social studies class, his teacher said, debate abortion. Like why would you give that to 13-year-olds? But that's what the social studies teacher did, debate abortion. And literally every single kid in the class, other than my son, was saying yes, abortion great, can't wait to do it. There should be basically free infinite abortion. And my son was
mhm.
the only person who was like, no, I really don't like the idea of killing babies. And he was trying to argue with them why that's not a good idea to kill your own babies. And they were hostile. These 13-year-olds, already little psychopaths, talk about psychopaths, already little psychopaths, they just couldn't wait to kill their own babies. I was horrified. And clearly their parents don't have these kinds of conversations with them.
Yeah,
Clearly my son was the only person who had like sensible thoughts about this.
yeah.
And this is the result. And they're 13 now, they're almost dating age. Well, what's going to be the outcome of this? They're all going to be, doing all this crap.
Yeah.
It's really, yeah, I'm not black pilled, but I think I'm almost there. No, I'm optimistic, to be honest with you. I'm a little bit optimistic because I see that when I put effort into guiding and teaching and helping, it's working. My clients do get better. My family members who listen to me do get better. And I'll
Yeah,
be honest with you, Stefan, the people who didn't listen to me, they're dead.
yeah,
People
yeah,
that they're dead now. And so to me, that was kind of um the underlying statement from the universe that it is worth it to have these kinds of conversations. It is worth it to stay and fight and teach and guide, because some people are receptive and some people are going to take that ball and run with it. It doesn't have to be everybody, but it has
doesn't
to
have
be
to
a
be
few
everybody,
right
no.
people, you
One or
know.
two people, that's already enough. I mean, I've been doing that my whole life, mentoring young men. They look up to me because I'm, the kung fu guy, and um, and they listen. They're interested in learning, and I always take an interest in young men, and I encourage them to become better versions of themselves. I don't preach. I don't lecture. I don't, I hate gurus, So anytime I start to sound like a guru, you let me know because I'll shut up. Um, but you take an interest. And again, this goes back to what we talked about earlier about a Renaissance man. One facet of being a Renaissance man is to take a proactive role in your community. You got to give back to the world,
So
and if that
explain
means
explain that.
teaching and leading and bringing people in over for Thanksgiving, whatever it takes, you take a proactive part in your local community. I can't affect the whole world, but the people in the small town here, no problem.
Exactly. Can you explain that term because I've heard the term and I love the term, but I know some people have never heard the term Renaissance man, or they think it's like an artist like Leonardo da Vinci. What exactly is a Renaissance man?
Well, a Renaissance man is what they used to call a polymath. A polymath is someone who has skills in a wide variety, or has knowledge and experience in a wide variety of skills. Um, it's also somebody like a Renaissance man originated during the Renaissance era and is embodied by people like Leonardo da Vinci. But you got to understand, Leonardo da Vinci, yes, he was a scientist. He was a brilliant painter and a sculptor, and he was a warrior. Da Vinci worked out. He was in top physical condition to the end of his days. He was a warrior. Same thing with somebody like Miyamoto Musashi, who is a 16th century Japanese swordsman, famous throughout Japan as possibly the greatest swordsman that ever lived. He defeated dozens of people, maybe hundreds of people in combat to the death. So he was a warrior, but you know what else he did? Flower arranging, painting, philosophy, wood carving. So this is what a Renaissance man is. A Renaissance man is really what Nietzsche used to call the Ubermensch, the Superman. It's the best you could be. You have to cover a wide variety. You need to be knowledgeable. You need to know science. You need to know architecture, and but in addition, you also need to know painting and art and music and dance. That's all part of being a Renaissance man. But you also need to know mechanics and science, and you also need to be a warrior. Either equestrian or archery or martial arts. And that's what a Renaissance man, it's somebody who has mastered not just one skill, because we tend to, oh, he's an accountant, that's his skill. Okay. That's not enough. If you want to live life as a person greater than yourself, you have to do all those things, all of them. Oh, I don't have time for that. Really? Turn off the TV.
I know, right?
Turn off the smartphone.
Yeah, get
Guess how
off.
much time you'll have.
Yeah, no sludge content. Well, I think what happens, Stefan, this has just been my observation, is people go through some steps, they master something to a certain level, and then they're like, I'm good. I'm comfortable. I don't need to. And people, like a lot of people, they just want to be comfortable. Although I understand that, ultimately that comfort zone can become your grave, because you're either getting better or worse. If you're not getting better, that comfort zone is going to shrink, the world is going to leave you behind, and you're not going to realize what has happened. You're going to go the way of the dinosaurs. So you always have to go to the next level of your development. Like I studied with a shamanic mentor for 9 years, and he was an exorcist. And when I tell people, yeah, I mastered exorcism, they're like horrified. I'm like, no, I loved it because I got to help people for real, like help them in a way that regular therapists can't help them. And I had a lot of success. And I then was called to do other things. But I wanted, when my mentor died, because eventually he got very old and died, and I was looking to continue my training, I knew I would probably never find another mentor like that. He was just a very, very unique individual. I feel like he adopted me. I really feel like he was my spiritual father, which is like a very unique role that he played in my life. So I kind of figured I probably am not going to find a person like that again, but I have to continue my training.
Yes.
That's definitely one thing that he taught me, is you always have to stay in training. So
Always.
that's how I found martial arts, because that was the closest thing that I saw that was to the psychic warrior art that I was already doing,
Yes.
except it was on the physical. And it just made sense. Okay, well, I'm already doing it. I might as well learn how to do it on the physical. Because what I realized, Stefan, this was the big realization, is that the demonic, the dark forces that people think of, yes, they're spiritual, but eventually, if they're allowed to exist, they will become physical. Will encounter somebody or something physical that's demonic. It can look like a person. And that, and some people call them NPCs or whatever, but no, it's not just NPCs. There's an actual demonic force there. I'm not saying they should be killed. Nobody misunderstand me. I'm not saying now, like, go and put a stake in their heart. That is a confrontation that you can have to teach you something, and you may have to have a kind of a spiritual battle with that being. So you were talking about government and politicians. I've seen some really dark forces amidst those. They look human, but I would venture to say that those are really, demons who they just can't take the illusion of a human form. So that's a very shamanic perspective, that can happen, that you can, that the, you were saying our mind is very plastic. The universe is very plastic too.
Yes.
And energies can take on different forms. And
Yes.
and in the old days, people knew that demonic forces can take on a human form, and it's even in the Bible. That the devil was once an angel of light. Well, what does that mean? It means that now in our world now we can encounter both angels and demons in human form. That's also in the Bible. Angels appeared in human form to somebody multiple times. So, or you can entertain an angel unawares. So there's a lot going on here in this realm that meets a lot more than meets the eye, and you have to pay very close attention. And so to me, that next level of my development was I have to master a martial art. It's very, very hard.
Yes.
I
Yes.
now train in MMA. I really love it, even though it hurts a lot. But
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
like it makes me a better spiritual warrior. It keeps me always in training and challenged. And I think a lot of people don't want that. They don't want the challenge because they want to be perceived as have achieved, I've accomplished, I've achieved, I'm good. Whereas I had to start as a white belt, like in a
Yeah.
brand new field, where nobody knows me, and they don't know the battles I've battled. And so, and nor am I going to tell them, because
Yeah.
I'm there to learn something from them.
Right.
So I think just continual climbing, continual willingness to be brand new at something where you're
Sure.
uncomfortable and you don't get much respect and you have to fight all over again for anything. But I think that's what it takes. You have to be willing to continue to fight for
Yeah.
what's important, you know.
That's why you have to be a warrior, because, people don't understand what we're up against. And they think they can fight evil. No, he can't.
A lot of
Right?
people cannot. They cannot.
You,
They
they
cannot.
cannot stand up to it. That's
Well,
why there's so
I
much
think
evil in the world. The way we're going to conquer it, we need more warriors. Only a
we need,
warrior can battle
absolutely.
that kind of
Stefan, I
evil.
think it's worse than that. I think it's not that they don't know how to stand up to it, it's that they like it. When they encounter evil,
That's another
it
thing too.
matches their vices. They don't want to let go of their vices. They don't want to let go of something in their shadow. They're attached to it. Um, they they may not admit it, but actually they like evil. They and so when they encounter that dark force, it gives them the permission to continue to engage in that, whatever that is.
Yeah.
And so when people say, oh, the demon made me do it, or I was influenced, I'm like, yeah, but you're attached to it too.
Yeah.
It's attached to you and you're attached to it.
Yeah.
It's mutual. And when you're ready to let go, it will let go too.
Yeah. There's an interesting story in the book, My Journey to Lhasa. Have you ever heard of that?
Who's it by?
Alexandra David-Néel.
I'm not sure.
She was a British aristocrat. She married one of the aristocrats, and the marriage wasn't too good. But so she wanted to go off on adventures, and he didn't mind, and she didn't mind, and at least he was able to pay for her to do what she wanted to do. So this took place like in the 1920s, and at that time, women were not allowed in Tibet. Period. Foreigners weren't allowed, but women certainly weren't allowed. And she went and she lived in India for about 10 years, studied, you know, the Hindu and the yoga arts until she felt she was ready. And she disguised herself and entered Tibet. And she had a young Indian monk as her assistant, as her guide. And she tells a story that using her powers of imagination, she wanted to create an entity. So she imagined a Buddha. So you want to imagine yourself getting younger, you'll get younger. You want to imagine your tumor shrinking, it'll shrink. You want to imagine your cartilage repairing itself, it'll repair itself, because your mind does create reality,
Absolutely.
which is why I tell people to avoid the occult, um, all that demonology and witchcraft and all that. You don't know what you're getting into, because once you're in there, all that stuff becomes real.
Well, when you're looking at it, now they're looking at you. And
exactly.
if you don't know how to navigate that neighborhood, it's not a great neighborhood. There's all kinds of stuff there. You
No.
have to know, you have to be able to navigate it. That's why I was so blessed to have a teacher who helped me to navigate that reality. Stefan, I had no choice. I was born intuitive and psychic, so I saw all that stuff. It was automatic for me. I couldn't turn it off.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I would just saw everything, and I couldn't understand why other people were not seeing all the stuff that I was seeing. I'm like, what's going on? This is very strange. But basically I just learned you can't really talk about it to most people. They don't get it. But John, my mentor, we were it was just an immediate wavelength connection. I would just tell him I had a dream and he knew what the content of the dream, including the dialogue that happened in the dream. He just was
Yeah.
so psychic, and and he understood me very, very well. So he helped me to navigate that world, which is why I was able to be successful with doing the exorcism for so many years. For about 10 years I did that. And so I think that if people are just curious, that's a bad reason to go into that world. I clearly had a calling, because why would I be born with that? Why would God give me that ability to, and have me be born like that, unless I have a calling to do something constructive with it, which I've done, and I plan to do more. But I think, yeah, just curious or just dabbling, not a good idea. Or if somebody wants to use it and like manipulate those realms for their own gain,
Yeah,
oh,
good
they're
luck.
gonna get a big papow. Yeah, they're gonna
Yeah,
they're gonna get hit.
yeah.
So I wanted
So,
to ask you a little bit more. Like you mentioned, um, oh, sorry, I actually wanted to go back. You said something, and then I wanted to ask you another question. So you were mentioning how like yeah, it's dangerous to look into those realms. One thing that's for sure I know just from working with clients with this for a long time is that because people have had a lot of trauma, all kinds of trauma, including past life trauma, that trauma is what they don't control in their mind, and the trauma creates the fear-based negative entities. So the more trauma a person has, the more negativity they'll see around them. And yeah, we do create our reality from our mind. Part of the reason why we're going through a nightmarish situation is because a lot of people have so much trauma that they've unhealed. And that's when I realized it, I'm like, oh, that's why it's worth it for me to stick around, help people heal their trauma, even if it's
mhm.
one person at a time. That's slow, but that's better than no movement at all. And as we heal the trauma, then people can start to imagine a better world and create that better world. But ultimately, it is up to us, but we have to heal first.
Well, let me just finish the story about Alexandra David-Néel. So she imagined this monk, and after a few weeks, this is while they're traveling through Tibet, um, her acolyte could see the monk. It started to become tangible, and they could see it. And at first, it was a very friendly kind of entity that would travel with them, and other people could see it was complete creation from her mind. Might have been something like ectoplasm or whatever. I don't know. I'm just taking her story. But what happened is, slowly but surely, this imaginary monk became more and more threatening, more and more evil, until it got to the point that she and her young Buddhist partner, companion, were afraid of this thing. It became demonic. And so then it took her, she said, about a month of meditation to dissipate that evil energy and get rid of it again. So yeah, you these evil entities are real. A lot of it is created by your mind, probably through your own trauma, and you have to get rid of it. You have to use your mind to
Absolutely.
disperse. Yeah,
So, and how do you do that, right? Because that's the question. Some, and there's different techniques from different traditions, and I've tried different ones. I can say for myself what I think works the best in terms of the results that I've seen is um, working with some higher positive power that will take that energy under its wing and guide it. So it's a little bit different than, like, in martial arts the goal is to either knock the person out or submit them. And in war it's to kill the other person. But in the spiritual warfare, it's about integration. It's about taking that energy that's quote unquote the enemy and integrating it into a higher, not yourself, you're not enough, but into something higher. For some people, it's God or Christ or Buddha, but something more powerful that will take that energy and guide it like a seed into a more positive frequency. So a movie that I might recommend is Journey to the West. It's based on an old Chinese classic. And I won't give out the whole story because I want people to watch it if they're interested in this topic. But there is these different demon hunters. They're called demon hunters, but what they are is exorcists, different ones, and they're all competing for whose method is going to be the best. And they all have these different tricks and tactics and all of this. And in the end, it's love that wins. It's the person who's able to take those energies and actually guide them into something positive, to make allies out of them. Not allies like, oh, this demon is going to do work for me, but no, you transform it with your love into something positive. And that's a completely, I think, different way of looking at the art of war, in the way that John taught me. It's about love and heart. And it's about that when your love is strong enough and it's really connected to your higher power, you can transform all these nightmares and demons and horrors into something positive. But you have, like, it takes a lot of focus and dedication. And I think a lot of people overestimate themselves and they think their love is enough, and it isn't. You need a strong connection with a higher power to do this. You have to be very, very humble to do this. Have you seen that movie, Journey to the West?
I read the book.
Oh, yeah. And I have not read the book, but I saw the movie. But I one day I'd like to read the book. I saw that.
Oh, it's an awful book. Chinese literature is it's just overwhelming. It's I don't like. I've read it all. Dream of the Red Chamber and All Men Are Brothers. My favorite, of course, is Romance of the Three Kingdoms. It's the only one that sort of is readable. But anyways, no. What you're talking about doing, though, Ariel, I don't know anybody that can do that.
I've been doing it, Stefan. I've been doing it for an entire decade
Okay,
with
then I know
success.
you.
So
Most people can't, they can't even grasp what we're talking about. And
yeah. Well, most people are not interested. That's the problem. They're simply not interested. If they took an interest and pursued it, you don't have to be a genius,
no,
they just
no.
have to be willing to learn. They have to be coachable and teachable, and I could show them how to do this. And ultimately, I think everyone should do some of this, not at the level that I did. I saw clients 40 hours a week. Like that's all I did. I didn't have any other gigs or jobs. That's all I
Oh,
did.
that's too much.
Well, yeah, I did burn out, but it was because, I really wanted to help people, but that's a whole other story. But the point is, I was successful and John was successful. I just didn't try to become famous. I didn't, I have some
Yeah,
reviews, but I
yeah,
didn't write a book yet about it. So if I didn't talk about it, nobody would even know. That's why I'm like,
yeah,
I have to talk about it. I have
yeah.
to tell people this is possible because I did it, and here I am. I'm just one person, I'm not like a famous star. I don't have a PhD. But I would think that I have a good heart and I'm a good person. And there's a lot of people like that. They have a good heart, they're a good person, maybe they're a simple person. You don't need a lot more than that. You just have to be coachable and teachable and be willing to do this kind of work, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I just don't know too many people that are open to it anymore. Most people I know don't know how to tie the shoelace, let alone.
Well, yeah, I mean, realistically, I don't know too many people who want to work at all, do it like
Yeah,
anything. You don't want to
yeah,
do
I
anything,
know.
much less anything complicated like this. But another thing that this is another scientific study that I believe David Wilcock did some research on this, that and some institutes, I think institutes that studied meditation, where they found that there's only like a certain small percent of the population that really has to be the change makers. It doesn't have to be everybody.
No, no.
There's and I don't remember what it is, 5 or whatever it is.
Yeah, about 5%.
Yeah, there was like a
Yeah.
certain amount of people that were meditating on whatever, love, compassion, and it was changing the atmosphere of the entire city. Like the crime went down and stock market went up, and things were improving overall for everybody. So a lot of people, they seem to be receptive to frequencies, but they're not creators of frequencies.
Hmm.
So whatever that percent of people, 5%, who are creators, those are the people that we're talking to. And I just
Okay.
don't worry about the other ones, you
Yeah,
know.
no, I don't either. Love me, hate me, it's all the same to me. I'm a stoic. What do I care? No, the way I approach that with the evil is I starve them of their energy. I don't try to connect them with a higher form of positive energy. Like I said, I've only had to, and this was a long time ago. Look back in those days, I was like astral projecting and going out into the astral planes, and you would encounter these things in the astral planes. It's very, very frightening, and you have to be careful because they will follow you back home, and they'll attach themselves to your aura, and so you feed them with fear, with depression, with anger, with hatred. Um, that's what feeds these things. And so part of what I teach people is to be a stoic is that you don't, or like Kirchhoff would say, the non-expression of negative emotions. So you don't express this stuff. You don't give into your anger. You don't give into your hatred. You don't give into your fear. Um, you control it, you dissipate it, and by controlling it and dissipating it, you rob the evil source of their energy. I'm sure you're familiar with the Archons, the theory of the
Oh,
Archons, and that, right?
yes.
And they're obviously controlling something behind the scenes, and so why is the whole world miserable and fearful and evil and angry and hateful? And well, that's the food for the Archons. They're encouraging it. That's why they divide us and control us and always try to pit us against each other because, and of course the wars. Oh my God, they feed off these wars. How come there's endless war? When has war solved any problem ever? Never has it ever solved the problem. All these young boys, they're butchered by the tens of thousands and the millions, and then the civilian casualties. You should know from the history of Russia the number of civilians that suffered in the last 100 years. 80 million, butchered and killed and starved to
Absolutely.
death. So that's what, all of this stuff. Um, yeah, you have to cut off their source of food.
Absolutely. Stefan, from my understanding that all of these wars, what they really are satanic rituals, mass scale satanic rituals that
Yeah,
where the people are ritually sacrificed. And that's why there's specific sigils, specific flags, specific spells, specific affirmations that are said in speeches. People wear them on uniforms. They just don't think about it. They think that I don't think they think too much about it. They're
no,
told not to think too much about it, but it's in fact set up to be a ritual where the energy is then collected and then used for some dark sorcery purpose.
yeah. It's funny. There's a Japanese anime series that I used to watch when I lived in Taiwan back in the 80s called Full Metal Alchemist. And actually it's the one of the main things in that anime series is that war is a spell. It's an evil spell. It's a big giant blood sacrifice for
100%.
the evil entities that feed off of it. So I mean, even a Japanese cartoon echoes that exact concept. Yeah.
Yeah, I think smart people figured this out. It's that we need to figure out what to do about it now. I think that like we evolve slowly, and that's why it is good to have these kinds of conversations because we learn together and we can understand how things actually work. We can dispel the illusions. There's so many illusions that we're constantly being through programming, through frequencies. We're just bombarded with illusions, and we have to cut through to the truth. And once we have the truth, then we can figure out what to do. We need an action plan collectively together. We're talking about community, right? Even if you're not necessarily connected to all these people in all these other countries, there are a lot of people like us who think like us. And when they see these kinds of conversations, we start to be on the same wavelength, and then we start to be able to act together.
Mm-hmm.
And I just feel very strongly that first of all, not all is lost. There is still a way to avoid World War III.
Mm-hmm.
I feel that the way we get there, I think, is not how we think. I do, I look at a lot of content online to see what people are saying, what do they think needs to be done. And I think they're right about some things, but I think that ultimately handling it politically is not going to be the answer. I think it has to be
No,
handled
no,
from the heart.
politics is never the
Yeah,
answer.
it's never
Yeah.
the answer. It's going to be individuals doing heart-based things in their daily life. I think that's how it's going to change. That's
Yeah, and then for us to build all our small communities, because those are the communities that will, after this is all over, there's a golden age coming again.
that's
All
what
right?
I believe. Yes.
Everything is a cycle, history repeats. We are currently now in the downfall cycle of our civilization, which is a terrible time to be alive. It's strife and war and death and misery and disease. But this will pass. All things pass. Everything, the Zen saying that you never step in the same river twice, because everything changes all the time. So this will go to all these evil people, all these wars, all this, that too will pass. And according to the theory of historical cycles, after the age of chaos, which is what we're in now, comes a new golden age. And that golden age is called the warrior age. It's warriors that create the golden age. That's why, people like you and me, and we make our communities and we, spread the knowledge that we have, and we encourage people to become warriors, because it's warriors that will create a new golden age, and things will be wonderful
Now
again.
that's very interesting. I obviously, of course, have heard that about the golden age. I have not heard that it's warriors who created. Tell me about that. Why is it warriors who created?
Um, Good question. Um, it's called that by, like, when I came up with the theory of historical cycles. I mean, I didn't come up with the theory. What I did was I amalgamated like 6 different theories. Every Everybody from Polybius to um, Sarkar to, now that we got the House and Strauss and Howe theory of cycles, and the Hindu and the Vedic cycles. But they call the golden age the warrior age.
Hmm.
Well, the warrior age is because we fight the evil, we stand up for. By the way, women's rights and happiness has always been highest during the warrior age. It's not, toxic masculinity keeping women down. Actually, it's the reverse. Women have always been elevated to a high position and had a great say and influence in society during the warrior ages. It's later when you get into the intellectual age and then the merchant age that it all starts to fall down. The merchant age starts off okay, but at the end of the merchant age, you end up in the chaos, absolute degradation. And that's when, women are at their lowest in terms of health and influence on society. But it's the warriors that encourage women to be themselves, to embody their feminine principles, because you need that. Look, I'm male, man, guy, um, but I'm surrounded by powerful females here in my community. These women are awesome. They're amazing. One is the leader of our medical team, and she's a holistic healer. She makes her own medicine. She goes into the forest. She knows what plants to pick, and she brings them home, and she makes tinctures and extracts. Um,
And I think that's a role that women can play very, very well, being the healer and essentially the physician, the midwife, the
yes,
doula, and as well as healing the warriors, because warriors need healing. So, and it's
yes,
a very important role. And I totally agree. And yeah, our society definitely suffers. Different groups talk about how masculinity is under attack, but also femininity is under attack, and children are under attack, and intelligence is under attack. What isn't under attack? Like
right.
everything, environment, animals, everything. And um, definitely, I have noticed that when women are healthy, they do the right things. They want kids, they want to protect kids, they respect men, they respect nature, they respect their own nature. And when women are unhealthy, it's just chaos. Their life is chaos, and they
Yeah.
inflict that chaos on the world. And if they have kids, oh my God, those poor kids.
Yeah. 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 Like all
So
the women that are in my life, they all have 4 kids. They all homeschool the kids. Don't send them to the school. They homeschool them. They're all married. They love their husbands. Their husbands love them. As a matter of fact, I married one of the women just last July. I was the officiant.
congratulations.
Yeah.
Wow.
So they want me to marry them. So I said, no, I don't know about that. But they talked me into it. It was a beautiful wedding. And, and I hear so many people say, where can I find a good woman? I never met. Well, there's good women out there, but probably not in a big city. Big key difference is that I'm in a rural area. I'm in a small town. We're surrounded by farms, a lot of Amish and Mennonite, and not the Quakers. What's the other one? The Shakers. Um,
That's
and
so
these are healthy, powerful women. They they give back to the community. Everybody knows them and loves them. They raise their kids, and that's what you need. That's the golden age again. Okay,
absolutely. So
that's the seed for a new golden age. Is to have these families, strong men. I know the husbands. They're tough guys.
mhm.
They work tough jobs. They work hard. They come home, and their wives are there looking after the kids. I mean, it's beautiful, and they're happy. They're
That's
happy.
right. So I'm in New York City. It's a calling. I wouldn't be here otherwise. It really is Dharma, there's a
Yeah,
reason
yeah,
why I have to be here now. Obviously it's, but, and I accept, when I'm guided by my higher power, I accept it. I'm in the trenches. It's okay. So I have
yeah,
a
yeah.
lot of clients here in New York City. What's interesting is that all of the women that I've been working with here in New York City, they all either already moved out or planning to move out. And so I'll tell you a story about one, since nobody knows her name, it's private, I can share it. When she first came to me, she was seeing a woman. She thought she was bi, I guess. And she had like so many autoimmune diseases, and she was in so much pain all the time. And she was like several medications for her brain and
Oh, yeah, yeah,
for
yeah.
mental health. She was just not good. And I don't coach anyone out of whatever choices. I just focus on foundations of health. I'm a health coach. So I help her to become healthy. And it's a lot of changes in diet and nutrition and lifestyle and sleep and water and helping them to like gently and slowly get off of all the medications
Hmm.
and teaching them the holistic lifestyle. And then so one day they don't need me. The one day they know how to do everything. They know how to take care of themselves in a holistic way. During the course of the program, she started seeing a guy, and most of her pain went away. It's like a 1 out of 10 or 0. She feels so much better. Now she wants to get married and have kids.
Yeah.
And it's like, I didn't have to change her mind. I just showed her how to be healthy, and she naturally became
Yes, yes, yes.
the original design. So
Yeah,
it's to show, I see some men who are really black pilled on women, and it's like, well, it's because everything is so unhealthy. And
yeah,
a lot of women don't think they can have kids, and they're in so much pain, and like they're on so many meds, and in that state they really can't, and maybe they
yeah.
shouldn't. So help them to become healthy. And instead of beating them constantly, oh, you're so messed up, why are you so effed up?
Yeah,
Just
yeah, 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 yeah.
help them to become healthy, and then you'll see they naturally will exude that original design
Exactly.
that was intended by spirit.
They will be guided by their own natural intuition
Mhm.
into a healthy lifestyle. And a healthy lifestyle is, I don't have kids, but I've adopted the kids
Mhm.
here. I'm their surrogate grandfather now. I love those kids. It's good. I'm over there at Christmas and Thanksgiving, and I babysit, and they're like my own kids. They really are.
Stefan, I have to give you incredible props. I think that's amazing, because I see so many men online who are saying, "Oh, women who have kids, don't date them. bad. And it's like, but what if that woman, what if her husband died? What if her husband was a warrior? What if she did everything right? She didn't whore around, that she had a
Yeah.
good marriage. Those kids are healthy. She's a good person. She's a professional. And you're gonna dismiss her just because she has kids, but you're gonna go with the single woman who may be on seven medications.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like, what are the priorities here? I'm just giving an example, right? Obviously, I understand that some women who have lots of kids maybe are not healthy, but just because she has kids, they don't want to date her. I think that's a terrible mistake. I think a mature man would always want to take care of the kids who are already there. It's like, why would he want? Why
Absolutely.
would he
Yeah,
want?
what's
Right,
kids are beautiful. I love
right.
kids. I've always loved kids. I always got along really well with kids. I used to teach the kids class in karate, and I'd have so much fun with them. I couldn't get them to leave the school. I said, "Okay, class is over. Time to go." No, we don't want to go. No. They just. I had so much fun with them, and where I sit here, I look out the window, and there's a grassy area, and there's like 8 kids that kind of hang out there, like little kids. They're like 4, 5, 6. They're running around and playing and I love to watch them. It's so joyful to see them. They're so happy. They're so innocent. Why, like I don't have to sleep with their mother or anything like that. I'm happy just to nurture them, to joke with them. And, I always have a secret handshake that I teach all the kids, right? Like I have 3 or 4 different handshakes, right? Uh, Viking handshake, boom, boom, boom. We got, and encourage them you know, give them some of your wisdom. And that's our duty. I think it's my duty as an old man now is to be the gentle, kind grandfather that bestows a little bit of wisdom, that teaches you how to fish or teaches you how to, do a front snap kick. Or that's our duty. And we're giving back to the community, which is, again, what a Renaissance man does, gives back to the community. And listen, don't take it out on the kids. They didn't make these decisions, you know. And I hear the same thing with people. Oh, I give up on humanity. I don't care if it all goes down and if it's a nuclear. Okay, great. You made that decision. What about all these little kids out there? They're beautiful creatures. They really are. They're so cute, and they have so much energy and joy for life. And oh yeah, but you're happy that they live 1,000 years of dark ages under a tyrannical rule of psychopaths because you gave up on life.
You
No,
know what? And that's why, even though I was, for years I was paying attention to all the like the prepper information, all that stuff. And I'm like, that's really important. I really should learn how to shoot a gun and all that stuff. I 100% agree. But I didn't like the idea that I should just go hide in a bunker somewhere.
no,
No,
no.
I'm here with we the people. I gotta stay on the tip of the spear because this is where the action is at. This is where the challenges and the learning is at. I'm not gonna live sitting in a bunker. It's boring. I'm probably gonna die of boredom.
Yeah.
I don't need a
No,
safe
that's
space.
why I didn't get along with many of the prepper groups because I didn't like the attitude. Because the
Hmm.
attitude was this, well, I tried to warn them, but shit hits the fan and they're coming up my driveway. I'm just going to shoot them.
Hmm.
But you're going to shoot your next door neighbor because he didn't listen to you because you're the prepper and he's not. And so you're just going to shoot him. And I said, and what if he's coming up your driveway because his 6-year-old daughter is starving? You're still going to shoot him? He's got 3 kids at home that haven't eaten in 4 days. They're hoping that you might be able to spare, a couple of pounds of rice that you stockpiled, but you're going to shoot them. I don't want to be part of that. I'm not. That's why with my book on forming communities, it's not like that. What I recommend for people that are prepping, 10%, it's a tithe, right? 10% of all your stockpiles goes back to the community, right? So whether that means you make a big pot of spaghetti that can feed 8 people, and you leave that pot of spaghetti on the doorstep of your neighbor because they have kids that haven't eaten, that is part of being a prepper. It's not just, oh, I'm going to survive and everybody. If that's the cost of your survival, then die. Because what's the point in that? So people have asked me that, well, what do we do? If they come to our house for food, I said, well, you've set aside 10%, right? and that you give back. So if they come to your house for food, give them food. I don't, I've got, like more than a year's supply of food. I'm perfectly willing to give a month's supply of food to the people around me, especially the ones that have kids. You want these kids to starve. Look at what's happened, like in the Holodomor, there in the Ukraine back in the 30s. You see the pictures of those poor children, millions that starved to death. And you've got, you know, an extra 2 pounds of flour. You could whip that
And,
up. You could
and
bake
I think
10 loaves of bread. You can't do that.
and I think all of that, although it makes sense at a 3D level, it completely underestimates the spiritual and psychological warfare. You can't hide from demons and dark forces in a bunker,
Yeah.
because they're going to connect with your mind and your soul. And if you lose your soul, it doesn't matter what else you have. It's the
Yeah.
soul that creates reality. If you lose your soul, that's it. You're pretty much done. Your time is very limited. And I think a lot of people don't understand that it's actually the soul that creates reality. And this is a very important shamanic teaching. And it took me a long time of working with the soul and helping people to heal their souls, and healing my soul over time, to understand how the soul creates reality. And the mind is kind of like the interface between what you're creating and the feedback you're getting from the universe. But it's the soul that generates the power, that animates that which you are seeing, basically. Like,
Yeah.
if you can think of it, like there's a film, and there's a film, and there's a projector, there's a light, and then it looks to be animated. Well, that light, you can think of the soul as the light.
Yeah.
And when people have a lot of trauma, they lose soul parts. The more trauma they have, the more soul they lose. And I see a lot of people, they're half here, half somewhere else. They lost so much soul, they're not really anchored here. They're not. And so people like that are the ones who get scared very easily, because they don't have enough internal power to generate reality. They don't, and they don't realize it. They just feel overpowered. But what they really should do is heal their soul and start to become the kind of person who can impact reality in a more powerful way. And I don't just mean with podcasts and speeches and politics. That helps to some degree. I mean, the soul itself produces reality. It's like a spiritual process, if you know
Mhm.
what I mean.
Yes. Yeah. Ariel, I'm sorry, but I planned on, because we started late, but I had originally scheduled to be done at 2:30 and we're at
Yeah, you gotta
3:30.
go. Yeah, I wasn't sure what your time was yet, because we started so much later. But yeah,
Yeah,
I'm
no, it's just
so
that I got to get ready. Tonight's the last meeting this year for our community, and I got a lot of things to do to get ready
absolutely.
for it.
Thank you so much for
But
sharing.
listen, if you want me to come back in a week or so, I mean, obviously we have a lot to talk
I
about.
would love to. There are so many topics to talk about.
So many topics, and we haven't even scratched the surface
I
of,
know, yeah.
right? So if you want me to come back in a week or 2 weeks, just let me know. I'll be happy to come back. But I'm running out of time for today, darling. I'm sorry.
Stefan, how can people find you, reach you, get your books, and get your information?
Okay. My website is called China Strategies. That's one word, ChinaStrategies.com. Everything's on there. It's a bit of a mishmash. I got everything. I got my art, I got music, I got books, whatever. And to learn more specifically about how to build communities, I have another website called Forming Communities, one word, formingcommunities.com. And yeah, that's the best way to find out about me.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Have an amazing
Oh,
evening.
it's my pleasure, Ariel. It's so good to talk to you.
You
And I had
too.
no idea you're so attractive.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. I don't hear that. I don't, I'm kind of a hermit. I don't hear that very often. I just do, like, I'm in service and then I go into my cave and I meditate. So I don't hear that at all.
Well, you are, and you've got such a, I'm glad to see you don't have purple hair.
Yeah, yeah.
You don't have a snake tattooed on your forehead. So to me,
Yeah,
that makes you
I,
quite
you know
beautiful.
what people call conservative now? I'm like, I kind of was always like that. I didn't know there was a word for it. I just am what I am.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
So,
again, thank you so much. And I'm really looking forward to talking to you again in the future.
okay, you let me know, send me a message, and we'll do it again. Okay.
Sounds great. Bye-bye.
Bye bye, darling.